many of you remember when Bill Clinton was president? Raise your hand. How many of you remember when a congressman from Georgia named Bob Barr took the courageous stand and filed impeachment charges against Bill Clinton? He didn't care what the media said. He didn't care what the left said. He ignored it and kept on standing for what is right, and he showed courage. As I said, we invited all the congressional and Senate candidates to appear. So it is my pleasure to introduce you to former Congressman Bob Barr, the one that had the intestinal fortitude to go after Bill Clinton and file impeachment charges. After his speech, we will allow you to ask 5 questions. So it is my honor to present to you former Congressman Bob Barr.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie. Conrad, I recognize you with the sign on. I didn't without the sign. Well, who was it that said deja vu all over again? I guess it was Yogi Berra, or somebody at least claiming to quote Yogi Berra. It is amazing, as Debbie was mentioning just a couple of moments ago about my work on the Clinton impeachment. I realized it was 16 years ago that I introduced the very first inquiry of impeachment against William Jefferson Clinton. And the other day, somebody said, Bob, you need to take those impeachment books off the shelf, dust them off, and start looking at the earmarked pages. And they're right. I tell you, with what is going on up in Washington, there is nothing more important than all of us as citizens, whether it is as elected officials, as we just heard from one of our great representatives, Scott Turner, or whether it is as activists like Debbie and so many of us here today, or as former and future congressional candidates and congressional members. There is nothing more important that we can do than to put before the American people the deep-seated systemic corruption that has infested not just this administration, but so many in Washington. That's why we need change in Washington. But it will not come unless we fight for it. Just as we fought for the fair tax, just as we have fought for tax reform and cuts in government spending and returning power to the people, what we need to do now is to ensure that this administration, despite its tremendous allies out there in the Congress, in the unions, and elsewhere, is held accountable. Now, where this leads us, I'm not sure yet. But I can tell you, as this old prosecutor knows, where there is smoke, there is fire. And folks, there is plenty of smoke in Washington these days. And I know some folks are sad, including those IRS officials and fired IRS officials who testified last week. Oh, don't worry, there were no laws broken here. We may have made mistakes, and we're mightily sorry for that. We may have made bad policy decisions, but trust us, we won't do it again. The fact of the matter is that they engaged in activities that are clearly unlawful under the laws of the United States. And for the Inspector General of the Internal Revenue Service, who is supposed to be nonpartisan, non-political, investigative, and counsel to the IRS, to stand there, or sit there, I guess he was too tired to stand, to sit there and say, oh, there were no laws broken, it was just bad policy, bad decisions, and trust us, we won't do it again, is absolutely outrageous. He should have been fired on the spot for that. Laws were broken. Where that will lead us, we still need to see. Darrell Issa, the chairman of the House Government Reform and Oversight Committee, is doing an outstanding job. We need to support him. We need to back him. Now, I don't know that there's much help that we'll get over in the Senate with the leadership over there, and that hopefully will change and change next year. You're right. Throw them out. Put some folks in there that will do the job. But we have a real opportunity here in Georgia with the coming elections to support our candidates here at the state level. There's a lot that can be done, as you heard from Scott a few moments ago. And of course, for those of us running to either return to or in other races get back up to the Senate, those of us running for the Congress, these issues need to be front and center. And I know, Debbie, with your leadership, the Tea Party will continue to make them front and center, because the Tea Parties believe not only in the Constitution as the foundation of our government, but in the rule of law, not the whim of men. So I look forward to being a part of this debate. And I will look at these issues as a former prosecutor, as a former impeachment manager, because that's what we need up there. We need folks with some background, some experience, some bulldogs up there. I've never been known as a French poodle. We need some bulldogs back up in Washington that understand the law, that will stand for the law, and that understand how government is supposed to operate wherever that leads us. So it's an honor and a pleasure, Debbie, to be with you all today. And as you mentioned, if there are a few questions, we'll be glad to try and address them.
Does anybody, if you raise your hand if you have any questions, please.
Or there isn't any.
Yes.
Do you support nullification of Obamacare?
Do I support nullification of Obamacare? Debbie, you can answer that. You know where I stand on that.
Absolutely.
I do.
I will ask one question. Do you think if it's proven that the IRS or that the Obama administration ordered the IRS to target conservatives, is that grounds for impeachment?
Debbie, I'm surprised at your cynicism. This was all just coincidence. I mean, that's all it was. You know, and the poor folks at IRS, they were just so overworked. They tried their best to get to these things, but bless their hearts, they wanted to get it right, and they just didn't have enough time. Well, you know, if you believe that, what else are you going to believe? You're going to believe in the tooth fairy. The fact of the matter is that clearly there were orders, and we don't yet know exactly how high they go. But we do know they go to the highest levels of government. Folks, you know, this wasn't somebody that in the Cincinnati field office that just woke up one day and said, gee, I'm going to target conservative groups. I'm going to target Tea Party groups. We do know for a fact that throughout the entire campaign last year, the President of the United States, who unfortunately was reelected last year, the President of the United States was going out there and virtually telling the IRS to target these groups.
Yes, he was.
When you have the President out there saying, oh, these groups are violating the law, they need to be looked at and so forth, should it come as any surprise that those who work under him, that work for him, went out and did exactly what he was saying on the campaign trail? They targeted them. Absolutely, it goes to the highest levels in Washington.
Any more questions? We also have another dignitary, Southside Steve from the regular guys. Steve, you want to say a few words?
I disagree with everything you're saying.
Okay.
100%.
We had Herman speak. Just so you know, when we first started the Tea Party, it was because of the promotion of the regular guys and on their show that were part of the integral success. So they are really patriots. I can remember going in, sitting in their little waiting room, waiting for my first interview on the radio, and I said, oh my God, these guys are more conservative than I am.
Let me just mention one of the other ladies up here asked about some of the other scandals. Let's not forget, as we focus on the abuse by the IRS, let's not forget what this administration did to a United States ambassador and 3 brave men trying to protect him. They abandoned them. And we should never stand to have somebody in the White House known as the Commander-in-Chief who abandons our soldiers and our dignitaries, our diplomats overseas. So there are very serious charges there as well involving dereliction of duty. We also have the problem that laws and constitutional guarantees were violated with regard to the targeting of the news media. in a supposed effort to discover leaks. So all of these issues are very, very important. But the most important one, from the systemic failure of government to operate within the bounds of the law, is the abuse of the IRS. We have just a couple more questions.
What hope do our children have? I have boys 14 to 30, or 16 to 31. What hope do they have that what Obama's administration and the Senate have done is going to change in their lifetime? Can it be fixed?
The question is, what hope do our kids and our grandkids have that the damage that has been wrought on this country by Obamacare and the other policies and activities of the administration can be changed so that there is hope for the future? There is hope for the future. I am optimistic. Somewhere out there is another Ronald Reagan. Maybe it's in this crowd right here. We have good candidates that are seeking office. A certain former congressman among them who actually can make a difference. We've done it before. We need to do it again. It takes leadership, political and ideological leadership, but it takes constant effort by we the people, and we do that individually. We do it through organizations like Debbie's and the other Tea Party groups. We do it by choosing good candidates through the normal party structure. More important than party label is, what do these men and women stand for? Do they understand the Constitution? Will they follow it? Do they have the backbone to follow these things through? So I am optimistic. I think that the election last year was a wake-up call that the American people heard, and I think that that has been sounded again through these scandals. It has awakened, as Admiral Yamamoto said right after Pearl Harbor, we have awakened a sleeping giant. The Tea Party is that sleeping giant. It has been awakened, the people have been awakened, and that gives me great hope.
In the wake of the Fast and Furious gun running, the White House has proclaimed that they have had no knowledge of or anything that dealt with that. How can the White House claim executive privilege over documents concerning that if in fact they had nothing to do with it?
Very good question. The question is about the Fast and Furious scandal, which ought to be bothering all of us, not just the family of Brian Terry, the brave Border Patrol agent who was shot, perhaps very likely through weapons that were made available to the drug cartel through Operation Fast and Furious. But all of us, we should not forget that case. The question is, how can the administration, at least with a straight face, claim executive privilege and not turn these documents over when, on the other hand, they say, well, gee, we didn't have any knowledge of it. We didn't know this was going on. Well, if that's true, then how can you claim that executive privilege? There are documents there that you can't turn over. Here's where Congress has to keep in mind, and we have to demand that Congress fulfill its vital oversight responsibility. It is the job of the Congress of the United States, and particularly the House, since we do not have any leadership or constitutional knowledge on the part of the leadership in the Senate right now. The House has to take the lead on this. They have to hold hearings. They have to hold people in contempt. They did that with the Attorney General last year. Unfortunately, when you have the Congress hold a member of an administration in contempt, guess who that contempt citation goes to be enforced? The administration. So there's really not a lot more we can do on that, but we need to not let these issues die. There are further hearings, further subpoenas that need to be issued. There was just something in the paper today, I think, about the former U.S. attorney in Arizona, the one that was fired, who did not follow, who actually consciously violated Department of Justice guidelines in trying to embarrass an agent who brought part of Fast and Furious to light. We need to support these people, we need to demand that Congress not let up on its oversight. Really, that's the last best hope we have in Washington right now with what's going on in the Senate, with the dour Harry Reid in charge. The House has to take the lead on these things. And that, incidentally, is one reason why I'm running for election back to the House. We need somebody up there that understands these issues, that's been there, that's done that. I know this is not a political event, but it's very important that we get people up in Washington that really understand these issues and have the experience and the backbone to lead. Because if we don't, the answer to this lady's question would be a resounding no, but I will not do that. I am optimistic with your help. Thank you.